Hi class, welcome to lesson number 23 in our continuing microeconomics part of the micro-macro class. But, obviously microeconomics is substantial, it's a test in it by itself. So we're trying to make sure we do a good job in covering you guys microeconomics. So right now we're covering perfect competition. We're going to be done hopefully with this lesson about perfect competition, move on to monopoly. Before I do, I want to go over the homework question. The homework question from last lesson was draw me a loss case scenario with a single firm in a perfect competition environment or market structure, right? I'm going to do just that. So that being said, let me go ahead and erase this right here. So generally, when we talked about loss, right, we said, well, what does it take to have a loss? Well, so we said that the price, P, right, has to be less than the average total cost. The average total cost has to be higher than price, right? So how do we graphically show that? Well, we have the standard y and the x-axis where we have Q and P, right, since the beginning of time, right? Let me go ahead and use another marker. But point is that, we have this kind of standardized single firm graph, right? And there's some things that are just, no matter what you're drawing, profit, loss, or normal profit, which is zero profit, remember that. We have certain things that are standard, right? What are the things that are standard? Well, we said that the demand, right, is elastic, perfectly elastic for a single firm, right? A single firm, okay, in a perfect competition environment, correct? So, okay, we have this flat line, which is D. We also said it's equal to AR, which is equal to MR. By now, it should be coming to you guys pretty easily and pretty quickly, writing it down. Obviously, this is also equal to price because this is the PE line, right? Price equilibrium. The next part I said MC, which is marginal cost, right? A check, pretty straightforward. We've seen that before. Okay, so what's the different part? Well, first of all, let's make sure we have the quantity equilibrium. I said MR equals MC. That's where you find quantity. Why? Well, that's where you maximize the profit. Every firm, their goal is to maximize their profit. Okay, so MR equals MC, drop down, I got Q. QE rather, quantity equilibrium. Okay, so the point of this one is draw me a loss case scenario. So you think price, ATC, should I draw it higher than the price or lower? Higher, right? Because if it's lower, right, your costs are lower than your revenue, you're gonna have a profit. If your costs are higher than your revenue, you're gonna have a loss. Okay? So that's where we're going to go ahead and draw it. I'm going to make sure I'm going to hit the minimum because that's how it's supposed to hit, right? The minimum ATC always hits the MC at that point. Now the second part to the trick was find where MR equals MC. Go up or down, just depends on profit or loss. In loss case, you go up. To ATC, you stop where you hit that point and you hit a left and you hit the y-axis, right? And you form a rectangle, okay? And this rectangle right here is unfortunately your loss. Okay? So one more thing before I erase this is that profit, pi, is equal to QE times P minus ATC. P minus ATC is this vertical difference right here. You multiply by Q, which is this horizontal difference, and you get this rectangle. Okay? And that's how you draw a loss for a single firm in a perfect competition. Okay, so hopefully we have that down, and you're probably asking me what's the new stuff about. The new stuff is about shutting down. So when do you decide to shut down, and when do you decide not to shut down a firm? Well, we're going to show you guys graphically how it kind of plays out for a firm, okay? And let's start off with that. So let's see. So again, a graph, so your standard y and x, and I was saying this for a single firm, okay? For a single firm, you always want to label your graph so that not only you, but the grader remembers what you're doing, okay? So let me go ahead and say this is for a single firm, okay? Y-axis obviously is P, Q, I probably shouldn't be even saying it by now, but just to make sure we all are on the same page. Okay. So first, let me draw, instead of drawing the prices out, okay, let me draw the MC graph, which is a check, right? MC. Okay, cool. We have the MC down. All right, so what is next? Well, first I'm going to draw the AVC, which is a average variable cost, okay? I told you guys that variable costs are really important. Again, make sure this hits at the minimum. It says ABC, okay? And make sure that hits at the minimum level, okay? Because always should hit the minimum MC at the minimum point. Another next graph I'm going to have is the next cost graph, which is a little higher than AVC. You probably can guess it already. It's ATC, average total cost. And that's going to pierce to exactly the minimum as well, ATC. Okay, cool. So we have the AVC down, we have the ATC down. So what are these points that we're talking about in terms of shutting down? Okay, so I'm going to have 4 distinct points, okay? My first point is going to be right about here, okay? I'm going to go ahead and show you guys, go to the left and show you guys the price point here. I'll call this P1, okay? My next point is going to be right about here, between the AVC and the ATC. Again, same thing. Go left, show you the price of that. It's going to be P2. Okay. Now, third point is going to be where AVC meets meets MC. This point right here, where the arrow is pointing. Okay. That's going to be called P3. Okay, for this example, P3. And lastly, this lonely guy over here is going to be called P4. And everyone's seeing how I'm doing that. I go to this data point where I'm going to go to the left, and wherever that meets, that's my price point, okay? Make sure that's clear to you guys. On the same level, that's going to be your price point, okay? So we've got these 4 points. What are these? So on this side of the board, I'm going to erase whatever's on there. I'm going to tell you guys what P1, P2, P3, and P4 are going to mean to you guys, okay? So let's start off with P1. What do you guys think P1 means already? P1 is, let's see, what are the characteristics? P1 is higher than the ATC, right? So let's talk about P1, right? So this is going to be P1, and P1, right? At P1, P is greater than ATC, I believe, correct? Everyone see that on this graph? Price point, my P1 is higher than my ATC graph, okay? Pretty clear and straightforward, okay? So, okay, what happens when P is greater than ATC? We said a couple things. We said that it's going to have a profit point, right? We're going to have profit. Okay, so at this point, profit, pi, is greater than 0, okay? And you continue to produce, okay? And you produce where obviously MR equals MC, okay? So pi is greater than 0, produce at MR equaling MC. Okay, we got that down. So P1, pretty straightforward. We're making profit. People are good. People are happy. Good times. All right, so what's P2? So P2. Let's look at P2. What's going on in P2 here? P2 we said was between 2 points, right? P2 is between AVC and ATC. Okay, so it's between your average variable cost and average total cost. What does that really mean? It says that you're covering all of your variable costs, okay? But not all of your ATC costs. So somewhere in there, you're missing out your fixed costs, right? So you're able to cover your variable costs, but unfortunately, you're not able to cover all of your costs, okay? So does the company make a profit? Does it not? How do we know? Because, well, they're covering AVC, but they're not covering ATC. What's going on? Well, the point is that if your price point P is less than ATC, right? Your profit is less than 0. It's less than 0. Okay? You still produce it where MR equals MC. You always produce it where MR equals MC, but your profit is less than 0. So does this mean this is a shutdown point? It's not. Because what this is saying is if you can cover your variable costs, okay? If you can cover your variable costs, as long as you can cover your variable costs, you're fine. You don't need to shut down your firm. Why? Well, maybe you can wait for the economy to get better, right? Because you're able to cover your variable costs, okay? The problem gets started when you can't cover your variable costs. So what's happening at P3? So we said at P2, we're not making profits, but we can continue to, survive because we're covering our variable costs. Not all of our total costs, but our variable costs. So what's happening at P3? Let's look at it. P3 is exactly where AVC meets MC. So at price point 3, right, it's equivalent, it's exactly equal to AVC, right? So your average variable costs are equal to price point 3. So what happens there? Do we shut down at this point? Because you're just covering your variable costs. You're actually only covering your variable costs. None of the rest of the costs are covered. So what do you do then? Do you shut down? So the rule in economics is that this point right here, where AVC is equivalent to P, okay? AVC is equivalent to P, right? I'm going to write this down here, where we're going to call it P3, right? So where AVC is equivalent to P, this point right here is going to be your shutting down point, okay? Shut down point. The reason why this is called a shutdown point, guys, the reason why this is called a shutdown point is anything below P3, anything below where P equals AVC, you have to shut it down. Why? It doesn't make sense. You're not even able to cover your variable costs. Why would you be in business? Because, you know, to a certain degree, if you're covering your variable costs, you can absorb the hit and wait for the tide to, you know, come around. But if you're not able to cover your variable costs, okay, you're just digging yourself deeper and deeper, and you're not going to get out of it. Chances are you're not going to get out of it, okay? So the rule is anything below the shutdown point where P equals AVC, you shut down your firm. So P equals AVC, right here, you probably see it, right? You see the AVC point. You see where P equals AVC is right about here, right? And it's time, that's the shutdown point. So right here, that's the shutdown point. Where the arrow is, shutdown point. Do you actually shut down at the shutdown point? No, you don't. Okay, that's the tricky part. You don't shut down at the shutdown point. Anything below the shutdown point, you shut down. Okay? So P4, right? I'm going to write this here. P4, firm must shut down because price is less than not just your ATC, price is less than AVC. Okay? Price is less than AVC. And therefore, you must shut down at this point. Okay? So I'll just go ahead and write that down as well. Say, firm must shut down. Okay? At P4, firm is shut down because it's not able to cover its variable costs. So these are your 4 points that we have. At one point, we're making profit at P1. At P2, we're not making profit, but we're covering our variable costs, so we're okay. P3, we're exactly covering our variable costs, but nothing else. That's a shutdown point, but we don't shut down at that point. Anything below the shutdown point, we shut down. P4, we go ahead and shut down. Okay, so this is the shutting down graph, showing you guys the different points, okay? But basically, I think out of all of this graph, what you should get out is this point right here, where P equals AVC, that's where your shutdown point is. You know, how do we dictate that? Well, it's where your MC meets your AVC, right? And you figure out the price point right there, right? So here, at this price level, my average variable cost equals the price, the market price, and I must shut down anything below that point. Okay, so that's a shutdown point. All right, so we've covered that. Next topic I want to cover, okay, I'm going to go ahead and erase this part right here, is it's a pretty simple concept. It's pretty intuitive as well, but the thing here that we're talking about, okay, and I'll use the graph to my left at a point when I'm explaining this concept. And there are 2 major points that come out of this, okay? Now, the topic for this is short-run supply, okay? So short-run supply. Keep in mind that I'm still in perfect competition, okay? We're not moved on to monopoly. We're still in perfect competition. There's 2 points. First point is the fact that the MC curve, this is the key part, above the shutdown point, okay, above the shutdown point, acts as ready for it? The supply, okay, for the firm. Or rather for the perfectly competitive firm, but we're right for the firm. The firm that's in perfect competition obviously is perfectly competitive, right? For the firm. All right, what do we mean by this? And I apologize for the kind of skewed direction that this writing is taking place. Let me explain to you guys what this basically means. Okay, the MC curve says that anything above the shutdown point acts as a supply curve. All right, so what is it saying? So let's go over here, right? We have an MC curve right about here, okay? We have a shutdown point, right? I said with P equals AVC, that's your shutdown point, right? So they're saying that anything above, right? Anything above on the MC curve, this area, right? This area, anything above the shutdown point, okay? Anything above is acting like the supply curve for this particular firm. Pretty important, right? Because when I used to draw, I used to, have like a, when I used to draw these graphs, I'd have a, perfectly elastic demand for the supply or whatever it is, or for the firm, right? And people were like, where is the supply from? Like, where I don't see a supply. Normally, I need a demand and a supply. Well, in a single firm, right, when you're talking about a perfectly competitive environment or a perfectly competitive market structure, for a perfectly competitive firm, the MC above the standard point acts, above the shutdown point, acts like the supply curve, okay? Very important. All right, so we got the first thing down. What's number two? Number two is the following. I'm going to use this part of the graph, right, of the board, Second point basically states that the market supply curve, now this is not the firm supply, we're talking about the market, the entire market in the perfectly competitive market, okay? So if I was talking about a single farm right there that's producing wheat, I'm now talking about the wheat market, okay? So the supply for the market, right? MKT stands for market, is derived from adding up or summing all the individual MC curves. Okay? Let me finish this up. Dual MC curves. Now, why is this, right? Think about it. We've just established point one, the first point, established the fact that anything above the shutdown point, for when you're drawing a firm, MC of the firm, right, it acts as a supply. Okay, well, think about this. So this is the supply, all right, cool, right, for my firm. Well, if I add all of these up, right, each firm has its own MC curve, right, and it's acting as a supply. If I add up each of the supplies for each firm, that's going to form the market supply, okay? And that's exactly what this says. This says that if you have a supply for the market, the way you derive the supply for the market is basically based on the fact of adding up all the individual supply curves, or in our case, for the perfectly competitive market, individual MC curves, okay? For that reason, when we draw the market, and I'm going to go ahead and erase this part and show you guys when we draw the market, why and how we show this, okay? It's a pretty subtle point, but pretty important because, again, on your test, they'll be looking for this. And a lot of people, I guarantee it, will miss it because they just forget. And that's why we're going over this point for short run supply, is to show you on the graph when you see this, you're not kind of going, huh? Where did that come from, right? So looking over here, right, let me hop over so it's a little easier. But basically, and this is the wheat market, okay? Now we're talking about the market, guys. We're not talking about a single farmer, we're talking about the market, okay? MKT is market, right? I had a demand, right? Now demand, is it perfectly elastic or is it not? In the market, it's not, okay? So demand is downward sloping, just like usual, right? Supply is upward sloping, just like usual. And we had this equilibrium, right, where they meet, we have this equilibrium price, right? They're price takers and they're kind of forced. And this was your QE, your quantity that's supplied in the market. Okay, so what is the major thing? We're saying that supply curve of this wheat market comes from adding up each of the MCs from each of the farmer or each of the firm in the wheat market, right? So they're saying that if you add up all of them up, you have the supply line. So the way we denote that is that S is equal to, this sign over here is summation of MC. So this is saying that if I add up all the marginal cost curves, okay, I form the supply, okay? And that's why from now on, whenever we draw a market in a perfectly competitive market, we're always going to have S equals the summation of MC, okay? And that's how this is formed. It's a pretty subtle note, but very important at the same time, okay? Because I guarantee they'll deduct points if they don't see this. So know why we do that. Okay, that being said, let's move on. Again, let's move on to new stuff, which is we're going to talk about the way that the perfectly competitive market, this is the last part, and we're going to hop on to monopoly after this. But the point for this is saying, well, what happens, dynamically speaking, in a competitive market, perfectly competitive market, in the short run and short and long run, okay? So let's start off with a graph showing you guys what happens when there's a profit, right? Now, we've done this before. It shouldn't look alien to you guys at all. So that being said, let's draw this out, okay? So in our case, we have, first let's draw the wheat market. We're going to have two graphs, kind of identical looking, right? This is going to be the wheat market. I'm going to short MKT is going to be the wheat market, and this is going to be the single guy who's producing that wheat, right? So this is the single wheat farmer, okay? Okay, well, let's start with this one. Pretty simple, straightforward. Downward sloping D, right? Demand is downward sloping, not perfectly elastic like in the case of the firm. Supply is upward sloping. The trick that we learned just now is that S equals summation of MC. Pretty important. Okay, so we have all this, and then we said they're price takers, so the equilibrium where this happens forms PE, right? All right, so we've seen all this before, and I said I'll draw you guys a profit for the single wheat farmer, right? So let's kind of hop over here. And remember how you do that, right? Because the thing is that whatever the market says the price is going to be the price that this guy's going to have to sell it at, okay? So we're going to carry over this line, right? And this is your PE again for this person who's producing wheat, right? Have a flat line, except what's the difference, right? Well, we said that this is the demand, right, for this person. So little d stands for the demand, which is perfectly elastic, okay, for the wheat farmer. And this equals the usual stuff that we already know. AR equals MR, right, which is equals P, right? Obviously it does. Okay, what was the other thing we had? Well, we had this check, right? MC, by now this should come kind of automatic to you, where MR equals MC, right? This is MR MC. Hop down, we have quantity equilibrium, right? This is the quantity that this person produces, okay? Okay, that's cool. We said we want a profit, so ATC is going to come down below P, right? Kind of look like that. Okay, well, I'm going to hop down, ATC, hit a left, make that rectangle, and that's going to be my profit. Okay, so all of this we've kind of seen before. All of this we've kind of seen before. Okay, now the question is, what happens after this, right? So we've always kind of stopped here and be like, okay, what's next? Next is loss. But the question is, this is what happens in the short run. What happens in the long run? Okay, what exactly happens? Well, here's the argument. The argument is as follows. In a perfectly competitive market, I said, there are four characteristics, right? One of the characteristics we talked about is that entry and exit, okay, should be easy. There are no obstacles when it comes to perfectly competitive market structure. There are no obstacles for people to enter, okay, or exit. Now, I said profitability is what dictates a firm coming in or out of the place, right? So if you look at this, right, okay, well, are these guys making money? Well, obviously, this farmer is making money. His costs are lower than his price, and he's making profit. Awesome, right? Now, what's going to happen is you and I, who are not in wheat farming, right, are like, wow, this sounds kind of cool. I kind of want to get into this. I mean, I want to make money, right? So what will happen is that you and I, as entrepreneurs, right, we're like, this is pretty cool. We're going to start, we'll buy a farm somewhere, right? And we're going to start a wheat farm because people make money off of this. So what's going to happen is in the long run, now we're talking about the long run, understand that entry and exit, I'll write this down right here. Entry and exit of firms happens only in the long run, okay? Happens only in LR or long run, okay? It happens only in the long run. Why is that? Because you see, in short run, it's really difficult, right? It's really difficult to build models because there's too much activity going on. One can't really tell. But in the long run, one can say, hey, you know what? Looking at this last year wheat market, they made money, versus saying last week they made money in wheat, I should get into wheat. Makes no sense, right? If maybe next week they're going to have heavy losses, they're going to get into it? No. So two important things. One is profitability is what dictates firms getting in and out. So you and I are saying last year, which is a long run, right? In long run, all inputs are variable. So we said, okay, they're making money, let's start a wheat farm, okay? So we've decided to come into this market because this is in the long run. So entry and exit happen only in the long run, okay? For perfectly competitive markets. So if you hop over here, right? If you look at this graph right here, and this is going to be the long run, guys. So I've just drawn you the short run, and now I'm going to draw you guys the long run. Understand this, okay? I'm drawing the long run. I drew the short run. Now I'm going to draw the long run. In the long run, you're allowed to shift the supply and the demand, okay? So in the long run, what's going to happen is you and I and a lot of other people are going to say, there's a lot of money. People are making money in this market, right? So we're going to start our own wheat farms, okay? So we're going to hop in, okay? And what we're going to do is because we're going to hop in and start making all this wheat, the supply of wheat is going to increase. You agree? If more people start to make wheat, because you and I want to make money in this market, we're gonna increase the supply. So supply shifts to the left. You've seen the supply shift left before in other places, and it's exactly how it happens. Supply goes up, it shifts to the right. Supply decreases, shifts to the left. Okay? And this is your new supply. Okay? We'll call it S prime. All right? So look. Last time when we were here, PE was here, right? Price equilibrium was there. And this happens to be your quantity equilibrium for the market, right? As soon as I shift my supply, watch what happens to my quantity. And we'll call this quantity LR because this is the shift in long run, okay? Understand how to shift in long run. My quantity just in the market just went up, okay? My quantity just went up. What happens to the price? Price is always dictated by the equilibrium, right? Price is always dictated by the equilibrium. So if you look at this line, and you're going to see the new supply, right? Old demand, new supply. This is going to be my new price right over here. Correct? We'll call this price of LR. Okay? It's going to come along right about there. Okay? And it's going to be your new price long run, right? Because we're just carrying it over from last time. So look what happened. Price went down, quantity went up. That's exactly what happens when you increase supply. We've seen these shifts before, but now we have to apply it to this place too, because what happens here has to translate over here. So now there's a new price, and price is right about here, right? And look what happened. I find where MR equals MC, right about here. Right here, MR equals MC. So this is my new quantity, QLR, okay, my price LR. So quantity as a firm has decreased, right? the profits have gone away because all of a sudden, look at where ATC it hits, right? The profits have gone away in the long run, okay? Now, at this point, let's wrap this up, because what has happened to this firm is that he's lost all his profits. The profits are gone because you and I have decided to come in, supply has increased, and because supply went up, prices dropped, and the prices take away the profits. So, the point is of this class, the point of the class is, in the long run, there are no profits in a perfectly competitive market. Okay? There are no profits. It'll adjust, and if you have a loss, for example, if you have a losses in the short run, what's going to happen is that people are going to leave, right, because they're not making money. Supply will shift left, prices will go up, and losses will disappear. Point is, in the long run, you cannot have profits or losses in the long run in a perfectly competitive market. We'll explain a little bit of that, conclude in about maybe a minute or two in the next lesson, and then start off monopoly. Okay, but basic point is that understanding short run, long run. Short run, you can have in a perfectly competitive market, you can have profits and losses. Long run, you cannot. It'll adjust so that you cannot have losses or profits. Okay, so understanding this, next homework test question I want to ask you guys in the next lesson. I want to see the answer in the next lesson, and the homework question for this one is draw me this scenario. So draw me, taking from profits in the short run, draw me a short run versus long run. So what happens in the short run? I have profits. I'm giving you an answer right there. There's profits, right? Tell me what happens in the long run, okay? So basically, AKA, just draw this, okay? And that'll be your homework question. So with that being said, we're gonna wrap this lesson up and come in the next one, and we're gonna start Monopoly, okay? Thank you so much for joining me.